Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation. I'm going to take the next 12 or so minutes to talk to you about the inevitability of self-driving cars and how that will affect business. Self-driving cars, driverless cars, or autonomous vehicles are just that, cars that can drive themselves. This description is currently somewhat of a misnomer though, so the question is not if, but when vehicles will become fully autonomous and how the world will change due to that. There are a number of effects this would likely have, and I will cover those as we go on. But to begin, autonomous vehicles are actually not as recent of an invention as we might all think. The first quote-unquote driverless car was actually invented in 1925 by Francis Houdina. It was a radio-controlled car that he drove through Manhattan without anyone in the driver's seat. It was able to start itself, shift gears, and blow its horn. Then, in 1969, one of the founding fathers of artificial intelligence, John McCarthy, described his idea for an automatic chauffeur that would use cameras to navigate and a keyboard for people to enter their destinations on. Following that, in the early 1980s, Dean Pomerleau and another researcher at Carnegie Mellon started working on a prototype for their own self-driving vehicle. Their fifth iteration, the NavLab 5, was able to navigate 2,797 miles of a 2,850-mile trip from Pittsburgh to San Diego with no human interference on their No Hands Across America trip. 9 years later, in 2004, DARPA launched its first Grand Challenge, offering a $1 million prize to anyone who could build an autonomous vehicle that successfully navigated 142 miles through the Mojave Desert. Unfortunately, in this first challenge, all 15 competitors fell short, the longest making it less than 8 miles into the trip. Just after this, Toyota introduced its parking assistance feature in the US. This allowed Prius drivers to push a button, and the car, using cameras and sensors, would park itself. This technology was not readily embraced by other companies. Audi even started marketing their newest car in 2007 as the, quote, luxury car for people who can park themselves, unquote. Now, though, many more manufacturers have embraced the technology, including Audi. In 2009, Google was actually the first to start developing what would truly become a self-driving car, and since then, many manufacturers have followed suit. In what might be the most well-known brand for technology, Tesla introduced their autopilot feature in late 2014. The first fatal crash with this technology happened in 2016. In Tesla's defense, the system did warn the driver multiple times that he should take over, but he would not do so. Since then, there have been more fatal crashes and even a biker killed by a self-driving car, which opponents use to criticize the technology. But this is also partially confirmation bias, considering how much more press this technology gets than regular car accidents. In spite of the accidents, many companies have committed to developing self-driving cars by 2020. As I mentioned, Google was the first to actually start working on modern self-driving cars. However, the automaker that probably pops into your head is Tesla. Uber might be a close second. But in reality, lots of other manufacturers are looking to stake out their place in the market as well. There are others beyond these also, but I think you get the idea. Even some non-traditional companies like Waymo and Apple are working on this technology. So, how do these cars work? First, a three-dimensional map of the streets is built. Then, the main technology these cars use, called LiDAR, meaning light detection and ranging, takes over. These LiDAR sensors collect data as they are driven down roads, which helps them fill out the map and then start to navigate it themselves. They continuously use LiDAR to keep track of their surroundings and stay alert for other cars, bicycles, pedestrians, or other objects. In case of failure, or if LiDAR simply needs help, the cars are also equipped with cameras, radar, and GPS antennas, like in your phone. The cars use all of this data both to follow rules that engineers have written for them and for, quote, machine learning, unquote. Machine learning can't mimic the subtle actions that we have with fellow humans to signal someone else to go ahead of us or let someone else know we'd like to merge in front of them. However, as these cars become more ubiquitous, and they will, there will be fewer human drivers and the cars themselves will be able to communicate with each other, rendering these interactions unnecessary. This interaction via machine will also help reduce accidents. Currently in the US, there are approximately 15,913 accidents per day, of which approximately 101 are fatal. You can see that although there has generally been a downward trend since the mid-90s, there has again been a more recent uptick in accidents. It remains to be seen whether this will continue. So, what causes all these accidents? We can see here that 89% of crashes occurred due to the negligence or all-around poor decision-making by the driver. I personally wasn't surprised by this number, just given my own experiences with watching people weave in and out of traffic, blow by me at what are obviously speeds far exceeding the limit, and watching people text, watch TV shows, and put their makeup on as I make my way down the highway to work every day. So the question becomes, are autonomous vehicles the answer to this problem? And if they are, what does that mean for businesses? The first issue that must be faced is that most people consider themselves to be a better driver than they actually are, and certainly a better driver than a computer. 75% of people said they think or they are, or definitely better at driving a car than a computer would be. That number is astonishing to me, but I think it also goes to show how skewed our own views are of ourselves. In one study, most people rated themselves an above average or even exceptional driver, but believed both that others were worse than them and that other people would rate them worse. Some people who drive slowly and cautiously may think they're far better drivers than those who are more aggressive and drive faster, but neither is technically correct without a definition of good. Interestingly, even when given a specific definition for what was good driving, participants in the study still rated their own driving behaviors that they considered good as better than the given definition. In addition to the general idea that they drive better than a computer could, many people are averse to even considering the idea of buying a self-driving car. In one survey, 61% said they probably or definitely would not buy a driverless car. The other issue with the public we run into here is that there are a lot of concerns about self-driving cars. Here we see a list of the concerns people have about the technology. Clearly, the risk of a crash due to a sensor not seeing what it's supposed to is the biggest concern. However, humans are not infallible, and again, as we saw, 89% of crashes are caused by a human error of some kind or another. The other concerns mostly deal with the issues that we face with technology of every kind, the risk of failure, hacking, or confusion, and yet all of these concerns are valid with cars today. Our cars are already controlled mostly by computer and are therefore vulnerable to failure, confusion, and to hacks, as evidenced by the Jeep recall in July 2017. That's not to say that these manufacturers shouldn't be concentrating on security as well, but some say there is also a reason for optimism, as autonomous vehicles have so many different systems working together that they are trained to not just trust the word of one system, but rather make sure that other systems back up what the original system has detected. This makes it much more difficult for hackers to deal with because, quote, it's way closer to the way humans figure out whether something is an illusion or not, unquote. Even if we overcome concerns about the cars themselves, the economic impact on both businesses and infrastructure will be enormous. Some statistics say that self-driving cars will add $7 trillion to the economy over the next few decades. This looks like a great number. However, there will also be a high cost to pay in many areas of business for this advancement. One of the main concerns when it comes to autonomous vehicles is the sheer amount of jobs that will be rendered obsolete. All of the following jobs will disappear: truckers, taxi, Lyft or Uber drivers, bus drivers, delivery drivers. Those are some of the obvious ones, but others that might be affected include gas station attendants, car washes, and public parking lots. Goldman Sachs did an analysis of the possible job losses due to vehicular automation. They say that once self-driving cars reach their peak, job losses could be as high as 25,000 per month or 30,000 per year. All in all, more than 5 million jobs would be lost due to both the direct and indirect effects of this technology. This is over 3% of jobs. What this doesn't mean, though, is that 5 million people will automatically be unemployed. What it means is that now is the time to start thinking about solutions and training programs that can be put in place to assist the transition for these workers and aid them in acquiring new skills and finding new jobs. In addition to inevitable job losses, another major question is, in the case of an accident, who's at fault and who should insurance companies hold liable? Additionally, how will these cars change the face of insurance companies in general? As we see here, there are 5 levels of automation for cars. As more vehicles become levels 2, 3, and especially 4, insurance premiums will fall and eventually make personal auto insurance basically unnecessary. At that point, manufacturers will be held responsible if their cars are involved in an accident. Additionally, since the number of cars owned by people will likely decrease and automated ride shares become more common, insurance companies will see their overall number of policies decrease as well. The other industry that will absolutely be affected by this technology is the auto industry, and I think the effects can be summed up succinctly: uncertainty ahead. There are some strong possibilities of what will happen, but I don't think anything that can be determined right now for sure. However, I'll first present a likely issue and then my proposed solution. First, self-driving cars will lead to a decrease in private auto ownership as more people turn to ride-sharing that saves them money on gas and maintenance. The solution to this is for automakers to shift their manufacturing to focus on creating and innovating for these new types of cars and the software and technical parts they will need. Obviously, there will always be the main components of the car. However, other technology groups such as NVIDIA are already working on staking their claim in manufacturing the necessary technological pieces for these new types of vehicles, and traditional manufacturers would be remiss to not begin to, pardon the pun, shift gears now. The second issue they face is that current mechanics will be unprepared to deal with this new technology these vehicles will use. The solution to this is twofold. First, provide the necessary training for these workers, and second, offer digital maintenance services to those that do purchase cars. Perhaps a kind of extended warranty, except this would be on the digital aspect rather than the physical aspect of the vehicles. A final issue they could face will be lots of new competition in general. They can combat this by making decisions now to partner with companies like Uber or Lyft or other ride-sharing or public transport companies to become their exclusive supplier and supporter of vehicles. There are undoubtedly many additional considerations and risk assessments that automakers should be talking about right now as well. There are 4 other industries this may affect that I want to touch on quickly. If the number of people that privately own vehicles decreases dramatically, meaning there would no longer be a need for licenses, registrations, or plates, DMVs could see a huge loss of business. Granted, companies would still have to potentially register their vehicles, but I would think that could move to an all-online system, rendering the need for in-person DMVs basically null. In line with that, driver's education courses and instructors would also likely go the way of the dodo. A third industry that it really remains to be seen what will happen is with motorcycles. Many people who own motorcycles do it because they like to ride them and be in control. I imagine that autonomous motorcycles, although there are some companies working on them, certainly wouldn't have the appeal that current ones do. How, or even if they would be allowed to be on the roads with all autonomous vehicles, is a hurdle that will likely need to be faced at some point. A final industry that could take its dying breath soon is that of traditional radio stations. Once cars become completely autonomous, it's unlikely the drivers would choose to listen to the radio when they could do a variety of other activities, including listening to something specifically curated for them like a podcast, or watching TV, meditating, sleeping, playing games, the list goes on. As a final wrap-up before we look at some discussion questions, I'd like to quickly recap what I've already basically said in a SWOT format. For strengths, obviously these cars, once thoroughly tested, and especially once they are the only kind on the road, would be safer for all vehicle occupants and pedestrians, bikers, etc. They would eliminate all human error and undoubtedly be extremely easy to use. And finally, most manufacturers are already on board with their development, some promising them as soon as 2020. When it comes to weaknesses, we've seen that there is a distinct lack of public enthusiasm and sometimes downright refusal for their adoption. Second, driverless vehicles, as they stand right now, are not actually that, since a human still needs to be in the seat and paying attention even when using something like Tesla's autopilot setting, which brings us to the fact that more testing and development is needed to get a truly safe and autonomous vehicle. Opportunities include putting an end to all types of distracted or dangerous driving, which would lead to a significant decrease in traffic deaths. These vehicles could also create the possibility that cities would become less crowded because people have the ability to move to the suburbs and simply call an autonomous vehicle to pick them up. This possible retreat out of cities could also allow for the restoration of green space that was previously used for parking lots and would also help reduce pollution because there would be fewer cars on the road. Finally, threats include, most obviously, the loss of jobs or revenue in other industries, possible backlash from the public or other agencies, unions, companies, etc., that don't see this as a good thing, the lack of expertise in maintaining these vehicles, and the potential threat of the technology being hacked. Finally, we have some questions to consider. Do you think the technology will really be in place for self-driving cars to be ubiquitous by 2020? How should companies look to overcome the biases and fears people have towards self-driving cars? Will this end up being good for business / the economy, or will it cause more harm than good? Would you buy an autonomous vehicle? Why or why not? Any other thoughts you might have? Thanks so much for listening to my presentation today, and I look forward to our discussion.